thinking still, I'm sure. There we go. Now, what you may have found out last time when we were looking at these is that initial camera shot really plays a huge role in making sure that everything else is going to work. If we choose a crazy camera angle, it can be very difficult to line up the rest of the stuff inside the scene, especially if we don't have the footage that's lined up to it. So we always want to be looking for those kinds of things. What is a cool camera angle to use, but also one that allows us to add items to it. So if you're doing something for like a Hollywood film, they shoot whatever they want for the film, and your job is just to make stuff that actually looks like it would fit inside the scene. So if I needed someone from a specific angle, I could go to the CG department and say, hey, I need this bottle, you know, rotated like this because that's the angle I need for the shot, and they would just do that. Here, because we're dealing with stuff that we've already captured or stuff that's already created, we have to be a little bit more selective about what we use. Also, we want to make sure that when we start something, it's going to end up being a bit more interesting than when we started with. So something like this shot here, although masterfully taken, is actually a pretty boring shot. There's not much in the scene, right? Versus something like this, which has a lot more stuff going on, a lot more ability to change things inside that view and make it feel like it's more of an entire shot. This one with the table in the way could add to something cool to it, but I'd really need to make sure I had something specific that I would add to that table. Otherwise, it just looks like an odd shot. Okay. Also, focus plays a big deal. Also, the grain plays a big deal. So just be aware of all of those things as we progress. Okay. So I'm going to grab I think 46 should be a good one. I think that's the one I used. So grab 46. Yeah, this one has some grain, but not as much as the other one. Yep, that's the right one. Okay. So I opened up 46. I'm going to set my white balance to, I believe I set this one to auto. Yep. So I set it to auto. And this does a pretty good job of white balancing it, so the wall looks like it's white versus looking like it's yellow. And just keep in mind, too, the projector is not seeing what I'm seeing on my screen. So if I choose as shot, all right, definitely looks yellow up there. It looks a little bit whiter. Okay, so that's pretty accurate. All right, so this is auto. That works pretty good. All right, so I'm just going to open it. I don't need to do too much color correction to this because what I'm going to do is inside Nuke, that's where I'm going to really play with this. So now I'm just going to save this as backplate. I'm going to call it 001 because I already have a backplate. And then I'm going to save it as either a Targa or a TIFF. Either one of those formats is acceptable. Either one of those will go into Nuke without any problem. We do not ever want to save it as a JPEG, because JPEGs will lose quality every single time we save them, okay? So save it as a Targa or a TIFF. And I'm saving it in the same exact folder. So in that same source files folder, that's where I'm putting it. If I go too quick, if we're at a point where I've way ahead of everyone and you don't know where you're at and you don't know what to do, just say, hold up a second, let me get where I'm at. If you're get to the point where it's like you're way behind, well, then just take notes. Watch the video later and then catch up, okay? Yes, sir.
So what did you call this one?
Just backplate.
Backplate.
Yep. Because this is going to be our background, okay? Nothing else is going to be behind it, so it's our backplate. Okay. Now, anything else that we would want in the scene, we would also do that same thing. So if we went down here to the chairs, we found a chair that was at an appropriate perspective. I think this 50? Nope, that's too low. So 49, I believe, was a good one. So 49 I would grab. I would apply the same auto white balance. and hit done or open. And then just save that as chair, high chair, I guess you can call it because it's a high chair. And then I'm saving these as TIFFs. Again, TIFFs or Targas, either one is acceptable. And then I will also grab, I'm going to grab Amanda's picture. We're not going to use this one in the lecture, but I'm just going to grab it so that I can show it. And then I'll also grab the recycle bin. Which one do I want for the recycle bin? 61 looks like a good enough one. So same thing, auto, open. Oops. And then 61. Don't do auto for the recycle bin. That looks like it's bad. It was in a different room, so the coloring is a bit different. I'm looking at the wall back here. It's a mix of light, so it's kind of hard. So I think tungsten's probably going to be the closest one. Or fluorescent. Fluorescent works. That looks like the closest color, at least, to the blue. Okay, so I just chose fluorescent for that one. And again, I'm just saving these as recycle bin. And then save that one as Amanda. Cool. All right, so once you have those saved, hit your start menu and type in Nuke X. There is, if you've installed Nuke on your computer, you'll find there's probably 12 versions that get installed. Nuke, Nuke Commercial, Nuke X Commercial, and then Nuke Shot or something like that. I don't know, it's like a million different versions of Nuke. You only need the one. Nuke X is the one that has all the bells and whistles that we'll be using. Where's my Foundry so we can see it? There it is. Yeah, there's all the different versions of Nuke. Nuke Assist, Nuke Studio, so much stuff. Right, and they all show up on the desktop. Yeah. It doesn't uninstall it either, which is crazy. All right, so once we have Nuke open, just a little tour of the area. On the far left are all of our tools that we would use, okay? So images and drawing and time and channels, all those things. So very similar to like Photoshop or After Effects, there's usually a filters palette or something, and then there's a drop down and then a bunch of stuff, okay? So Nuke's main stuff up here, I rarely use any of these up there, okay? Most of the stuff you're going to use is going to be right here. These are all the basic tools that we'll be playing with. This here is our area where we can specify what channels we're looking at. Yes, ma'am. Nuke X license? There we go. Okay, so all this stuff up here is for us to be able to preview channels. So one of the neat things is that you can actually embed masks inside of your images. So if you've been in Photoshop before and you've drawn something out, you may have wanted to bring it into After Effects and be able to clip out the background so you made an alpha channel inside Photoshop, okay? So that is one way of files getting embedded inside there. Or you've worked in 3D, and 3D automatically embeds an alpha channel inside of your image. Well, Nuke, we could have a bunch of different masks inside of one file. So if I had a car that I rendered out of 3D, I could have a mask for the tire, I could have a mask for the hubcaps, I could have a mask for the headlights, I could have a mask for the windows, a mask for the metal of the car, everything just built right into it, and then I can tweak all of those settings from there, okay? So this is where you would typically be able to view those things and then tweak what those things are connected, okay? We'll get into this A and B in a little bit. These are some other options eventually we'll play with. One of these is region of interest. Nuke is a huge resource hog. If you're using Maya on the computer and you're rendering, or you're using Cinema and you're rendering, or you're doing anything else on the computer, Nuke just like locks up because it needs all the resources on the computer. So it just like says, nope, I'm not going to work. So things like region of interest allow us to isolate just a small area and see what it's doing. So like this here, if I'm only working on this trash can right there, or recycle can, I don't need to see the rest of the image. I can basically make a little region and say I only want this area to update. And that will speed up how Nuke changes all of the stuff, okay? There's also this thing here, which is a proxy mode. So if you've been in After Effects, and I think Premiere has it too, and I would imagine Avid would have it, they have different quality settings where you could say I want to view this at half res or quarter res or whatever. That's what this is doing, is showing you those different resolutions to help speed up your workflow, okay? That's enough there. This is our different views that we have. People are going to hit the tab key in the wrong spot, and then that brings you into this, and then you freak out because, like, where am I at? You just hit tab again, or you come up here and you switch it back to 2D mode, okay? So Nuke does have a 3D built into it. That's what I was just in. I was in their actual 3D mode. Down here is our timeline. So this is where we can specify where things are at. The first one, we only have one still image, so the timeline doesn't matter. Here's your controls for the timeline, frame range, whatever. Most of the work that we do is going to be inside here, okay? This is our node graph. This is where we're going to build these structures of how all of this stuff is going to come together, okay? So we'll play with that more. Over here on the right, these are our properties. I don't use background renders, but those are our properties, okay? So what we want to do is we want to bring in our files. So way up here at the top, this is our image importer. So if you click on that, you can read, you can write, you can any one of those other ones. So what do you think we want to do? Read, okay? So we're going to read in our files. Okay, so go hit read. Before you start clicking around more, Nuke does not need a double click. So typically you go into a folder, you double click it to open it. Nuke does not need that. Nuke only needs single clicks. It's silly to say, but if you just single click on each folder, Nuke will just go right into it. If you double click, you might accidentally read something in there you don't want, okay? So go to your P drive and find your stuff. This thing right here, that little arrow. Okay, now you can control click each one of those items. So that way, if you wanted to grab one, control click the next one, control click the next one, you're perfectly able to do that too. Or as you're organizing your files, you could have one folder that has all your originals, one folder that has all of your edited or ready to go into Nuke files. Okay, so I have my recycle bin, I have my back plate, I have Amanda, I forgot one, which is my high chair. There it is. And then I'm just going to hit open. Okay. So what that does is it opens up each one of those. Now, each one of those items is called a node. It's basically like a like item, okay? So you can say item, you can say node, it's called a node. So these things here I can move around. I just click and drag, and I'm just organizing what I want this to look like. That's all this is doing right now. It's not controlling the end result. I'm just controlling where these things are placed. You'll notice that when we imported all the stuff in there, that on the far right of our screen, we have properties, and those are the import items for each one of those things. So if, for instance, we need to reload in our recycle bin, we grab the wrong file, whatever it is, I can double click this file, there's the recycle bin, I can click the folder and then reload it or do whatever I need to do with that, okay? If I have a sequence or a movie, it would also have a frame range here that would allow me to import the correct frame range. I have 500 frames of this animation. I would have that 1 to 500 right there, or 0 to 500 depending on what it is. It also shows the format. So here's my format. We'll change that in a second, not on this, but on other ones. Each one of these gets loaded in. Typically, when you read something in, you don't need to play with those settings, okay? So we want to close them. You can close them two ways. One way is the X over here on the far right. I gotta find a good hiding spot right there. That's perfect. I just want to make sure I'm recording audio, that's all. So if we click this X right here, that will close each one of those, okay? So you can click that X, or I want to close all of these. That's what this guy's for. That just closes all of them. So if you don't like clicking things, do that. All right. So we've imported these things, but we still can't see what they look like. This viewer is what controls what we're seeing. Okay. So this is another benefit of Nuke, is that at any point we can connect this viewer to any item in our node graph and see what it looks like at that moment. If I'm working on just a shadow, I can connect it to a shadow to look at just the shadow, or to look at a green screen, or to look at just a specific item inside there. So to connect it, there's a little arrow right here, and I could either drag this to one of my items, so drag it to one of your items, so you can see. Okay, and that should put up an image inside of here. Okay, you can drag it off of that and put it on another one. Okay, and again, that's a perfectly acceptable way to do that. If I zoom in, which is, which program am I in? Middle wheel, there we go. Alt and middle wheel, so I hold down Alt and I use my middle mouse button and drag right. You can zoom in to the node graph, or if I hold down Alt and I right click and drag, I can move the node graph around, okay? So kind of like the hand tool. If you look really close at your viewer, you'll see that there's a 1 next to it, okay? So each viewer can be hooked up to more than one item. Your viewer is gone. I'll show it to you in a second. That's what I'm going to do now. So each viewer we can hook up more than one item to, and the way we do that is by using either the arrow on the left. So there's another arrow I could drag out and connect to something else. Or what I do is I click on the item I want to see, and then I just hit the number 1. So hit the number 1 on one of your items. There you go. Okay, so any one of these items I can just click on and hit 1. And that makes it like 10 times easier than dragging a stupid arrow around. Okay? So now let's say I want to be even lazier and I want to be able to compare two items together, okay? So let's say that I have this image here and I have that image there, and I wanted to just see what they look like without having to constantly move my mouse back and forth and clicking 1 back and forth, back and forth. So if 1 connects it to the viewer, how do you think I connect another one to the viewer? 2, right? So I just hit the other one and hit 2. Okay, so now I have this one connected to number 1, this one connected to 2. Now if I click in this view up here and I just use 1 and 2, very quickly I can toggle between those two images. Okay, so this is where we may want to compare. What did our image look like before the reflection? What did it look like after? What did it look like before we added grain? What does it look like after? Are the changes that we're doing actually improving the image, or are they making it worse? You know, that's usually something we have to look for. Okay. Now, if I wanted to connect a third one, 3, right? What if I want to connect 10? 0, yep. And then there is no 11, so, all right. And then just to disconnect them, you just drag them off, and then they all go away, and then you can click on 1 again. Perfect. Okay, so that's how we can connect these things together. Now we're going to do the easy one first. We're going to take the recycle bin and we're going to cut this out of this background here. Okay. So I'm making my view a little bit bigger just so you can see that image. The cool thing about Nuke, and I keep saying the cool thing about Nuke, everything is cool about Nuke, but just another thing to add to your list is, and I lost it, dang it. Nope, it's gone. It's gone. Oh, the node graph, yep. So if you see someone's node graph, you can actually kind of figure out how they did something based on just what the node graph looks like. If I gave you a Photoshop file, you'd have no idea what I did with it. Even if you saw the layers, you'd be like, I don't know what's going on. If you see the node graph, you can kind of get an idea. So with this, what I want to do is I want to add a keyer to this specific item, okay? So I'm going to click on my recycle bin. And a keyer is something that allows me to grab a color and extract it out of an image, okay? So on this recycle bin here, I want to pull a color out. So I'm going to go over here to where it says keyer, and I'm going to add a keyer, okay? These are all different kinds of keyers. We're going to go to the simplest one first. So just keyer, okay? Now the second that we do that, what should happen, because we had this selected, there we go, it's easier to see. Because we had the recycle bin selected, and then I added the keyer, is that it adds it into the chain, like that. If I didn't have it selected and I created a keyer, it would just be a random object sitting out here, another node, and it wouldn't be doing anything. It has to be like connected to something in order to work, okay? So just so you can see, I'm going to add a keyer. Don't look at what I just did. Just see that. Okay. So I have a random keyer. Now Nuke allows me to hover over this, so you can see I can hover over that. It highlights. If I let go, it'll actually drop it into that chain and connect it just like it was before. Or what I can do is connect this and then connect that, and that would do the exact same thing. Okay? So think of it like a chain. It has to start somewhere and then go somewhere and then go somewhere. The very end thing, that's your result. That's what the end product is going to look like. So here we have a recycle bin, and then we've added a keyer to it, okay? All right, so here's the keyer's properties. So the way that it works is, you know your levels in Photoshop, you have those 2 sliders and then one in the middle. So this one actually has 4 sliders. There's an A, B, C, and D, although the B, C, and D are all over here. So if I drag the A, don't do this yet. If I drag the A, it pulls this over. If I drag the B, there's that. If I drag the C, there's that, and then there's the D, okay? Now I have to tell it what kind of key I'm doing, because there's something called a green screen, which is a green screen, just like we shot in the back. There's a blue screen, there's yellow screens, there's whatever color screens. The reason that we chose green in this case, I already had it, number 1, but number 2 is because that color does not exist in my recycle bin, okay? So anytime you're using a green screen, that specific green doesn't typically exist in a person, so they will use green for that. Sometimes they will use blue if the person has green. Sometimes they will use yellow if the person has the other colors, okay? Now this one is crappily set up, and I did that on purpose because I want you to see how difficult it is to cut a green screen when you just kind of slap it together. There's no lighting on this green screen. I actually have an area here that shows the door, and then there's folds, and it's disgusting. But it's fine because you'll be able to see how horrible this is. Also, there's tape right here, and the tape is actually reflecting just a smidge of that green screen, right? So stuff we have to consider when we actually do stuff for real. So first, let's pick what kind of screen this is. So under Operation, we choose Green Screen. Okay. Then we can drag the A and scoot this over. And then you can also grab the B and scoot that over too. Okay, so is anything happening? Something's happening, we just can't see it, okay? So remember I said in Photoshop we can create an alpha channel and then we can send it off to other programs. So the second I created a keyer, it started making an alpha channel because that's how it's going to store the transparency for this. In order for us to see it, I have to hover my mouse in this window and then hit the A key. Boom. Okay? So hover your mouse over your screen and hit A, and that's your alpha channel. So now what I can do is if I start playing with these values again, Now I can see how I'm affecting that. Okay? So ideally what we want is that. Okay? My A is basically all the way over to that other side. Okay? Because we want just this trash can or recycle bin isolated, nothing else inside the scene. Ignore this big white chunk over there for a second. All right, so we drug that all the way over. We've isolated just that recycle bin. Now what I need to do is get rid of the rest of this. So this is why it's important to kind of frame your shots correctly when you're using this, because now we have to do an extra step just to cut it out. If there's no getting around it, there's no getting around it. But that item was small enough, and I had enough room back there, that I should have been able to have this thing fully on a green screen, nice and neat. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here and hit A. And that takes me out of that. Okay, this doesn't look any different. Now, I do want you to pay attention to down here. So see down here, you see red, green, blue, and then this other number. Those are all the different values that my mouse is hovering over. So does anyone know offhand how many colors there are in a 8-bit image? What was that? Of red, there's 256 different levels. Of green, there's 256 different levels. And of blue, there's 256 different levels. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you actually get like 16 million different color combinations. Just for fun, 256 times, yep, 16.7 million colors, okay? So 16 million different color combinations by having only 256 different values of red, green, and blue. So that means that, imagine all the values are at 0, I can go up 1 on red, 2 on red, 3 on red, 4 on red, all the way to 256, and then I can mix in the green, mix in the blue. So hovering my mouse over this, do you see how it's 5 decimal points? Okay? That means there's basically at least 100,000 different values right there of just red, of just green, of just blue. Okay? So we can store a lot of information into each one of these points, and it doesn't stop there. We can actually push these values above 1 so that they actually go really, really high. So another awesome thing. Okay? Now, what I want you to pay attention to is that white one on the far right. Notice as I move my mouse on the recycle bin, it's 1, and then as I move my mouse over here, it's 0. Okay? So colors are basically just numbers. That's all they are. Okay? If I hit A again, come on. If I hit A again, you can see this is 0, this is 1, right? So 1 is just like a pure white, and then black is a 0. That's what that means. And if I were to zoom in, not really there because there's nothing there. If I were to go over an area here where it's kind of gray, you'll see some mid values. Okay? So pay attention to that in 1 second because that's what we're going to need to know for this next step. All right? So we have our recycle bin. We have our keyer to cut it out. Now what we need to do is actually cut out the rest of it. We need to fill in the rest of this area with blackness so that it goes away. Okay? So we're going to add a roto. So if we click on the keyer and hit O, O adds a roto node to our stuff. Okay? A roto node is basically the pen tool. So anytime we want to use the pen tool, we have to create a roto node. There's also something called the roto paint. If I was going to try to airbrush something out of my scene, I would use what's called roto paint. And it's basically like the clone stamper or paintbrush that I could use. So I could actually, if I had a building, I wanted to write some graffiti on it, I could do that right inside of Nuke. I don't need to go out to the Photoshop and then come back in. So the roto is, just like everything else, it's confusing. The second we went to the roto, we get this menu here on the left. Not really a menu, but just tool selections. And then we get some stuff on the top there. Okay? So just stuff to kind of pay attention to that popped up. So what I want to do is just make a rough shape around this. So I'm just clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging. And I'm going to go here. There. Okay. So I know that the green screen is cut out perfectly right in the center here, so I'm not concerned about that. But all the other area is not perfectly cut out. I need to fix it so it gets cut out. So use your roto tool and just draw that shape inside there. Yeah, if you need to zoom out, you can scroll wheel too. Nuke is kind of weird too with its stuff because sometimes you'll draw something, and then if you like click off of it, it's not going to let me click off of it now because I'm showing it. Say I clicked on this. No. Forget you, Nuke. All right. Well, it wouldn't let me do it, okay? So then I'd have to go back to this. I'd have to click on the endpoint again, and then go and do my stuff again, okay? All right, so every time we draw something with this roto tool, it creates over here in our properties a Bezier that is our roto, okay? It used to be called the Bezier tool. Now it's called the roto tool. It's just whatever, just deal with it. All right, so it's called Bezier. Cool. So now that we have this Bezier, what does it do, right? Because we basically just outlined something. So I'm going to come back over to this area and hit A again. And you'll see that my green screen is now completely white around that area that I just highlighted, and then this is white right there. Now what the green screen or what the alpha channel is going to do is anywhere that it's white, it's going to cut out that shape, and everything that's black, it just goes away, okay? So I don't want it like this because that's going to look weird. Yes, ma'am. All right, and nothing is locked in either, right? So if I get all the way down to the bottom of my chain and I'm almost done and I'm ready to go, and I realize, oops, I cut off that bottom corner of my recycle bin, scoot back up, adjust my curve, everything down the chain updates, okay, which is super awesome. All right, so this is white. I don't want that white. I can do a couple things. I'm going to do the easy one over here on my Bezier on this specific color right here. There's a color wheel, and then under it is a color. I click on it, and this will bring up probably one of the most confusing color selectors you've ever seen, especially when you start adding in all the other stuff. There it is. Okay. Holy cow. Let me just go back to what you saw so you don't get confused. All I want to do is I want to take the alpha right now, which is basically I've created a shape that's solid white in the alpha. I want to just drag that to black. Okay, so basically it just fills that area with complete blackness around there. Okay, now the same way that I did this, I could have just used the pen tool because it's a recycle bin, and I could have just outlined the recycle bin with the pen tool, made sure that the color was white, and then that would have worked too. The point of this, I want to show the green screen, so there it is. Okay, now if this was an animated item, let's say our recycle bin, I have an animated sweep because I wanted to animate this thing moving in our scene. I would have to go through and make sure that this green screen is perfect at each frame, and then I may have to go through and roto out each one of those specific areas. Okay, people's jobs at companies is to go through frame by frame and cut out each one of the people and each one of their parts. Sweet. So that's cut out. So now we hit A. Yes, sir. We went to roto. We used the roto tool to draw around it on the outside. And then we went to the color and just chose black for the alpha channel.
Okay, because when I was trying to turn it black, where it's black on top of the...
Nuke, where just some random stuff happens. Sometimes you click a button you're not sure of, or I'm not sure of, and I drop papers. So in most cases, you can figure it out, but in those some where you can't, sometimes it's easier just to take that node, delete it, and then re-add the node back in there, okay? So in that case, the keyer didn't work. I deleted the keyer, re-added the keyer, everything came together. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that either. It's just something inside here was clicked that it wasn't working. Cool. All right, so now that we have that, what I want to do is actually be able to now cut it out. Like I want to see what it looks like without having a background on there. So if I go here to my roto and I hit the tab key, this brings up a list of items that you could then just type in. So if you know I need to get to roto, but I forgot what the hotkey is, and he never showed it to us in the menu area, which you can just click through and figure out where it is. I don't even know where half the stuff is because I just use this tab thing. I think it's right there. Yeah, roto. There it is. So I hit the tab key, and I'm going to type in pre-multiply. Okay, so pre-mult. And what this does is basically we have an object, we have an alpha channel. It says, okay, now that we have the item, we have the alpha channel, actually like apply the alpha channel so that it cuts out the object. There it goes. Okay, so now I have just my recycle bin. And I'm going to hit this close button because I'm done with everything else. Okay, so just all those properties, just click that and get rid of it. Okay. So just to keep things tidy, let's tap the space bar down here in our node graph. Okay. Now notice how perfect my nodes are. This one goes into this one, goes into that one, goes into that one. Okay. Someone with poor vision would be able to definitely see how this flows from one to the next, to the next, to the next. This definitely works like this as far as I get the same result, but you can't see what's going on in there. Okay? I can't see how this flows. I don't know how things are connected. I don't know where to troubleshoot. So anytime we work on stuff, set it up so that it's nice and organized. Cool. So I want to basically group all of these together. Okay, so I'm going to create what's called a backdrop. What it is basically just a little image that goes behind it that allows us to say this is the recycle bin. That way from this far away, I can see that's the recycle bin. And I can move all of those groups, kind of all those nodes together. So I'm going to grab those 4 items, hit the tab key again, and type in backdrop. What? That's new. You guys didn't get that, right? No. I'm fancy, apparently. All right. Recycle bin. Let's hope this doesn't like destroy anything. Whoa, that is awesome. You guys should get this version. Look at the, I don't know, do you guys have Nuke 11? Yeah. I'm just extra. I don't know what that is. Maybe I click something else. Backdrop? No, that's it. All right, well, whatever. All right, so what this does is it creates this backdrop node, and all the stuff that's inside the backdrop node automatically gets grouped together. So you can resize it by grabbing the bottom corner and then moving it around. Now, this is the tricky thing with this, because the second something is inside this quadrant and I grab the backdrop node to move it, I lied apparently. There it goes. You'll see that now the whole thing is going to move with it. So if you wanted to adjust it, obviously you just got to be a little careful. You know, make that bigger, scoot this up, there it goes. Maybe move these down. Perfect. Just these 4 items. Yep. So it should automatically fit it to those. Yeah. So all you have to do is just drag this in. So if I drag anything into that, now it's part of the backdrop node. Okay? So it's very handy. Was that? Oh, you just like drag it out? Yeah, just drag it out. So if I did that, all those would be in it. Yeah, it's very cool because, again, it helps us stay organized, and from a distance, we can see, oh, there's a recycle bin, okay? What's that? You need to go up. Then you have to move these down. The other thing you can do is if you hold Control, you can drag this thing around without moving everything. Then you let go of Control, Oops. And click on it again, and then you can move it. Cool. All right, so if you hit tap the space bar again, that takes you out of that. And then you can double-click your backdrop node, and then that's where you would add your label. Apparently, I don't have to add my label because it automatically knew what I wanted. Okay, so I added recycle bin. That way I know it's a recycle bin. If it's something that you're going to be using over and over and over again, you could label it like that too. Like if we're using a vignette, I could highlight the vignette area, and then every time I need a vignette, I jump into that file, click on this node, which is awesome. I can click on this, copy it, and then paste it into a new file, and all the stuff comes with it too. Make sure you double click on the backdrop node name at the very top.
What makes a vignette different than a mask?
A vignette is just a darkening of the edges to help bring our focus into the center. So if we look at something like this, you do, but a mask is usually for cutting something out. So this here is essentially a vignette, but it's also a mask because there's nothing in the middle of this. If we look at any, I better not go to Instagram. I don't know what people are going to post on that. What? Vignette examples. Why would it? Okay. There we go. All right. So here's a photo that has some vignetting around the edges to help draw our eye towards that center. So it just darkens them and brings us closer to the middle. Same thing here. Same thing there. This one has a darkening, but also has the white border. Same thing here. Okay, so that's what the vignette is for. And a lot of work, if you watch it, will have a vignette inside there. Most professional photographs have some sort of vignetting. Not all of them, but a lot of them. If you use any kind of Instagram filter, there's vignetting on it. Some cameras just automatically do it just because of how their lenses work. It just naturally softens those edges. Okay, so you can do a change the font, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea with that. You guys are smart. All right. So now we have an item that's actually cut out. Now I want to join my recycle bin together with my back plate. Okay? So let's talk for a minute about how things get joined together, right? So we have recycle bin. We're going to have, let's say, high chair, and I may have Amanda, and I may have 12 other things that I want to add into this mix. What I don't want to do is take everything like this and join it together right in the center because it's very messy, right? So what I want to do is create some sort of structure that's very easy to kind of follow how things were added into the scene. So typically, people will work two ways. They will either work left to right, or they will work from top to bottom. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from top to bottom. So my main composite is going to be right here in the middle, and that straight line. Yes, ma'am. So what we're going to do is that center area right here, everything is going to feed into it. Okay? So any changes we do to our main item, eventually straight down this line, that's where we'll be able to see all of those different changes. Okay? So I'm just pulling this out so you can see where it's going to be. So all of my items that I create are going to be on either the left side or the right side, and then they will just feed into it from that side. So this one here, just so you can see, it will feed into this. If I added the chair, that will feed into that. If I added Amanda, that will feed into this. Okay? So everything is just going to feed in from one side. That way it's very obvious how my stuff is set up. All of my source items are over here, and then all of my main stuff of how it's coming together is right in the middle. Okay? So that's typically how people work. If you look at Nuke node graphs, node grapha, same thing here. Not the same thing here. Where is his main thing? Right here. Okay? So here's his main stuff that goes here, straight down, and right there. Now from one side he has some things coming in, from the other side he has other things coming in, and these things here, if you look at them, I have no idea what this is for, but all of this stuff goes into this, all of this is also fed into that, and then this comes over here. So all of this and all of this is just for that one hue correct mask. And then it all feeds in way down here, okay? So all of his stuff is right down here. All of his masks, it looks like, are on that right side. All of his source footages are on the left side. Again, you'll kind of figure out your own workflow. This is just chaos. And then if I go this way, this one is one going from left to right. So here is a piece of footage, and it gets merged. And then here's a piece of footage, merge, 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 merge. And then it all ends up on the right side. These are really messy. These should not be like wonky like this. That's horrible, but whatever. Yep. There's another one. It looks like this one's going from left to right also. Nope, that's a plugin, so that's different. Yeah, okay, so you get the idea. Cool. Whoops. All right. So what we want to do is we want to merge this pre-multiply with this. I expand this so I can see it better on this screen. If you want to, you can hit Control-S to save your stuff. Give it a name. Don't just hit Enter. And don't name it down here where it says filter.nk. It goes right inside this spot. So you would just call it your last name underscore still match. Okay. Once you've labeled it, what you can try to do, I tried this last time I played with Nuke on one of the lab computers. You can grab your Nuke graph, your node graph, and you can actually drag it off onto a separate screen. That way you have it full size, and then you have your work area full size as well. Just for fun, I'll try dragging this off. Okay, hey, it worked. So you can drag that off, and then you can put it onto one of your other screens, and that way it's full screen. It makes it so much easier to work with instead of constantly doing this. Okay. So now I want to merge those. Yes, ma'am. Just Control-S. And then just make sure that you put it, I already saved it so I can go there. Make sure you give it a name right here where it says name stuff. Okay, Nuke, was that? Yeah, in your folder, in your still match folder. We didn't set up the other folder structure yet, so just for now you can just throw it in there. Nuke does allow you to name your file as nothing. So you can save it as noname.nk, and it's perfectly acceptable, or not acceptable, perfectly allowable to do that. And you'll find you'll look for your file and you won't be able to find it. It's horrible. All right, so now I want to merge these two items together, okay? So because I'm using a merge node has, at a minimum, I need two different connections. So I have to merge two things together. That's why we're using a merge node. So I'm not going to click anything. I've just clicked into Nowheresville. And then I can hit the tab key and type in merge, or I can just hit M, which is the hotkey for merge. Okay? I'm still recording that. Okay. So you either click nowhere and hit M, or you click nowhere, hit the tab key, and then type merge, and then create it that way. Whichever way you'd like. All right. Some nodes will have two items that are required. Some nodes will have two or more items, where some items are required, some items are not required. Okay? So like the roto, this one has a main background image that gets fed into it. Then there's a background one here that we could also feed into it. And then there's a mask on this side, which we could also feed into it. Okay? So this merge has an A, it has a B, and it has a mask area. So those are all three things that we can use on this. It has inputs, that's why the arrows are pointing into it. And then it has outputs, the arrows pointing away from it. All right? So B, just remember background. So whatever is going to be on the background or the bottom of this goes into B. So the back plate is the background and the bottom, so that goes into B. And then A is the top, however you want to figure that one out. Just click that to the pre-mult. Let me just scoot that up so we can see it better. All right, So I have my recycle bin, green screen keyed out, rotoed, pre-multiplied. I have my back plate. They're merged together. Why can't I see it? Yep. I have to select on the viewer to pipe that in there. Okay? So same thing. I click merge and hit 1. Now I can see those two items joined together. It does look gorgeous. A huge recycle bin. That's how much Macomb cares about recycling. What was that?
What did you click for that?
We just made sure we clicked on the merge and then hit 1 so we can view the merge. Okay? So this is where people usually get confused because they're clicked on the pre-mult and they're viewing that. They're not viewing the actual merge itself. So we click on the merge, we hit 1, then we can view it.
Is there a way to add a letter C to that, or is it just like if you want to add more than one thing to
To this?
the merge?
Yes, yeah, you would just add, it's not a letter C, it would just be another A. But there is things that we can do inside Nuke, like leave our name blank. These are things that we shouldn't do inside Nuke, which is use an A1 and A2. You typically want to merge your stuff separately. That way it's easier for you to control and easier for someone to see exactly how things are put together. Okay? Yes, sir. Okay. All right, so we have our enormous recycle bin sitting there. And what we need to do is we need to obviously place this in the correct position. So what I need to do in this case is I don't want to screw with this original image, the keyer, the roto, or the pre-mult. All of these things are perfectly set up the way that they should be. All I do is want to reposition it. Any other program, we'd just be able to grab things and move it around. In Nuke, because of how it's set up, we need nodes for everything, okay? So if I click on pre-mult and I hit the tab key and I type in transform, that will create a transform node which will allow me to then move, scale, rotate, whatever that item. Yes, ma'am.
If I accidentally just press T and it brought a transform
Yep.
up anyway? That's
Yep,
the
same thing.
Okay.
Yep, and then there's hotkeys for everything. Some of them, like T for transform, is perfectly awesome. O for roto, it doesn't really make sense. But I guess R is read, so I guess whatever. All right, so now we have a transform node, and this, scoot that down. The way that this works is in the very center of this circle, we can move stuff around. Okay, so I can grab this and move it. Okay, if I go to where I'm on the edge of the circle, that's scale. And if I go to over here, this is rotate. Okay, so move, scale, rotate. Okay, so I'm going to scale this down. That's still too big. Scale it down even more. You have to grab your mouse right in that spot, right in that top corner, and then you can scale it. I think it works in the other corners too, but that's just typically the one I go to. Yes, ma'am. So anytime you have other properties open, it will constantly show you all that stuff. So when you drew the roto is still up because the property is up. So if you close all of those settings go away, and then you can just open up the one that you're working on.
It's not exactly scaling.
All right, so we can keep tweaking these settings, getting it position, whatever. That's perfect. So what I need to do now is I need to create the shadow and I need to create the reflection that's on there, okay? So I'm going to need just maybe a little bit more room here, so I'm just going to kind of scoot some of my stuff over, pull that down a little bit, and maybe pull this merge down. Now what I could do is have separate items merged in. So I could take my recycle bin, make a reflection, merge that into my main pipe. Make a shadow, merge that into the main pipe. Or what I can do is make one item that is recycle bin, shadow, and reflection all in one bit, and then have all of those merge into that main junction, okay? So I'm going to do the second one, which is just make one item that is containing all of those and then merge it in. So I really wish I had like 7 screens up here. I'm constantly adjusting this. Okay, so right here, this is our, sorry, right there. That is our recycle bin as it's placed right in that position. So what I want to do is I want to have another version of my recycle bin that's flipped upside down. So I'm going to click off of everything and hit T, and then just connect this transform to that transform. Okay, so I basically have a transform feeding into a transform. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the 2 transforms together. So I'm going to click off everything again, hit M for merge, or hit tab and then find merge. And then I will have B, which is my main one, and A, which is my other transform. Okay? So right now, if we were to look at this, I'm going to hit merge 2 and just hit 1. It looks exactly the same. I have 2 recycle bins sitting on top of each other. There is no difference at the moment. Okay? They're just right on top of each other. I haven't moved the other one away. Now what I want to do is I want to move that one down there. If I zoom out, you'll see there's a big transform manipulator here and a small transform manipulator there. Guess which one is the original? Small one, because I scaled it down. Okay? So I'm going to clear out all my properties and just double click the regular transform, or the transform 2. Okay, there's the big one. And I want to move the pivot right in there. So if I hold control and I drag this, it lets me move the pivot. I wish After Effects was like that simple. I could just move the pivot like that, right? Okay, so that moves the pivot there. And then this little dot, it may be hard to see. There's a dot on top of the circle and on the bottom and on the left and the right. These are scaled just in the one direction. So I basically want to flip this over, so I'm going to scale this in the one direction like that. Gorgeous. Okay, now don't be too particular about getting these to line up. Ideally, just like we talked about in Photoshop, you can kind of see that. I'm going to break this a little brighter so you can see it. Ideally, this corner would meet this, and this corner would meet that. I'm just going to just do that. Just overlap them so that both pieces are just right on top of each other. Now, remember, I'm viewing this merge, not this here. Okay? This merge that's in the main line, this doesn't have any of this information inside it. It doesn't have the extra transform or the extra merge. So I want to view just that extra merge. Okay. We just want to see the one, just that merge 2. Okay. Then we can take that transform 2 and just negative scale that so it flips over. Okay, just right on that dot right here. Okay, so should my reflection, should it be on top of my recycle bin or underneath my recycle bin? Underneath, okay. So if I look down at my A and B, I need to swap them, right? Because my reflection is actually the B, and then my other one is the A. So what I could do is I could disconnect both of those and then reconnect them correctly. That's doable. Or I can hit Shift-X on the merge. And Shift-X just means swap those 2 items. Mari, I think you missed this one right here. Just clicking and dragging that to flip it. All right, so now we have two of these. Now on this merge, we can go through and adjust the mix, but if you look at it, it's adjusting basically the transparency for just that top one, okay? So whatever the A is getting mixed into that specific one, and then that's what we're seeing. So what I need to do is I need to be able to play with the transparency of B, which is the flipped one. So if I go to, that should be good there. If I go to this transform and hit G, there it goes. G brings in what's called a grade node, and grade is basically like a overall color adjustment. You can do a lot of stuff with this grade. So what I want to do is I'm going to change up here. All of the nodes, or a lot of the nodes, will have a channels at the top, and these are like what channels are you screwing with. So I want to change this to alpha because we want to mess with the alpha channel. And just like before, we're not going to be able to see this until we come over here and hit A. Okay, so over this area and hit A so you can see the alpha. And then I'm just going to pull the gain down. And then you can see how the transparency of that is now fading. Okay, because we're basically just taking the transparency down on that one specific layer. Okay, cool. So now we can hit A again. We won't see a huge result there, but I think when we merge this in and we view that, we definitely see a difference. Okay, so there you go. I hit A again to get out of there. I connected my merge in my main line to my merge over here. Okay, so that's what your node graph should look like. You should have your read, you should have your keyer, your roto, your pre-mult, and then your transform for the main recycle bin, and the transform that goes to the shadow, the grade, the merge, and then that goes over there. Again, this all is like incredibly confusing, especially at the start. It gets 10 times easier the more we start to play with this, which obviously for this class will be most of the class. Why aren't you letting me scale you over? I want to move that over. Oh, because you're down further, that's why. And there's some sort of weird delay on my screen too, that's weird. Okay, so now I can see there is that reflection down here. If I look at the grade again, I can go ahead and play with that gain as I'm looking at the actual end result. Okay, so now I can look at the reflections of this item, the reflections of this pillar, and try to find something that kind of matches those a bit better. All right, how does that look? All right, it should be erased some. Something to pay attention to, and people do this in the when they draw stuff in Photoshop a lot too, is they'll basically just take whatever item they have and just flip it over, and that's the reflection. I would never see the top of this recycle bin in a reflection. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so I have to erase part of that so I don't see the top of the recycle bin. So what I'm going to do is I want to draw a shape that will let me kind of feather out what that reflection looks like, or what that shadow looks like. So over here on the grade, okay, this is the grade for the shadow. I'm going to hit the tab key and add a roto. And then I'm going to just make a block like this. Sorry, the other way. That. All right, so I just made basically a block around what I want to start fading out. So what this is going to do is, right now, it's let's see that. It's creating this kind of shape. I believe, let me make sure that. Yep, okay. So I'm going to come over here inside of my roto, and there is a way that we can take whatever item we have here and mix it in with whatever is already there. The default is set to over. So basically whatever I add to this is just on top of it. I don't want to do that because then I get this big chunk, which is what we're seeing. So I change this to a minus. And what that does is just subtract the alpha channel. Okay? So I'm viewing just this roto. I added the Bezier, or the roto, underneath it. And then I changed this to a minus. All right? And so now that cuts off that part of that shadow, or reflection, that's shadow. Right here, see these little two things? It's like at the bottom of that. And then minus right there. Okay? Now, we don't want it to be a hard transition. It should be a soft transition. So if I grab these little lines that are sticking out, I click on one of the points. There's these little lines. And I pull that up. This is a gradation. So this will kind of feather it. And I may need to pull it way down. Oh, that is really sharp. Let's go and do a feather fall off. That's good enough, I guess. There we go. That's better. So I really had to pull this really far down and then really feather it up in order for that to nicely blend. I also adjusted the feather on this side and the feather fall off on this side just a bit. And what these do is just kind of help feather or blend those edges in some. And then, of course, I could look at it on the actual end image. And that seems to work pretty good. Okay, so we're going to add a shadow. That'll be the last thing that we do for this specific one today. Next class, we'll come in and add some more stuff. So shadow, same kind of thing. I could add it separately, but because I basically have created a top and a bottom, I need that middle, which is going to be my shadow area. I'm going to do it still in this area. So I'm going to just draw in a shape and add it to the mix. So where should this be? We have an object, we have a reflection, we have a shadow. Where is a shadow in that mix of things? Go ahead. Yeah, under the object and then above the reflection, right? Okay. So if it's under the object, okay, so there's our object there. Here is our reflection here. It should be like between these two items, okay? So before we do this merge, that's where that specific thing should be popped into. So I'm going to scoot this over a bit just so I have more room. I'm going to create my shadow on this side and then drop it into here. That way it fits right inside that. So After Effects, we have what's called a solid that we would use to create a blank image. In Nuke, we have what's called a constant. So if you hit Tab and type constant, there's our constant. Okay, so we have a constant. I want to cut it out. So what should I use to cut something out? Yep, or the roto, right? So we hit O for roto. And I'm just going to draw just a rough shape here, just kind of like that. If you look at the shadows from everything else in the scene, they're pretty soft. This is harsh because the light is like right there above it. But look at the one for this garbage can. It's pretty soft as to where that's at. All right, so now we have it cut out. So now I'm just going to hit M for merge and drop that into the chain. I did nothing. Nope, I didn't pre-multiply it. That's why it didn't work. There's that. Constant, roto. Oh, it's outside my box. Whoops. Yep, that's all it is. Hang it. All right, so this is a new thing that we're experiencing because of this. We're using a separate constant. So I'm trying to draw this in the same exact spot that I'm seeing it. It's not working. The reason is that my constant is not the same size as everything else. Okay, so if we look at the size of this, this is 4,928 by 3264. That's when I click the button. That's what I took a picture of. When I go here, same exact size. When I go to my constant, it's 2048. So what's happening is we have an image like this, and we're drawing like way off canvas. Okay, so I have to tell Nuke that this constant is also that size. So if I go down to the bottom-ish, it's right there. Okay, 4,928. And then I see, there it is. Oops, I put that in the wrong spot. Why didn't someone stop me? This should be on the other side. So this should be merged into that there. Okay, so the constant should be merged into the reflection on top of it, not underneath it here, because that didn't work like that. Okay. And I could have swapped those probably if I would have just done the Shift X. That would have worked too, I guess. But this works. All right, so I have my constant, roto, and a pre-mult. And then that gets merged right into my reflection area right after its roto. And then I'm just going to adjust the colors of my reflections. Oops. There it is. Come on. And then I'm just feathering out these little edges on there, just so it's a little bit softer. So let me grab this over here. That actually might be even a better layout for us to be using.